Thanks for joining us on this edition of Business Daily, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Lee Ji-yoon. We have plenty on our plate today, so let's get started with the day's highlights. The U.S. Fed Reserve signals raising rates will come eventually, but not for a while, given the risks from the global economy. With only 2 weeks to go until the general elections here in Korea, we take a look at what pledges rival parties have put out and what they mean when it comes to boosting the domestic economy. But first, a fresh survey shows that Korea's top 600 companies by sales are forecasting gloomy business conditions next month. According to the Federation of Korean Industries, April Business Sentiment Index came in at 95.7, dipping back down 2.6 points from the month before. A reading below 100 shows pessimists outnumber optimists, and this trend now continues for a sixth straight month. The business lobby called for measures to turn around lukewarm domestic demand and shrinking exports, and companies were also pessimistic on investment, as slumping sales and rising manufacturing costs have been draining their coffers. Meanwhile, the Export-Import Bank of Korea is calling on companies to export more finished goods to China as the country sees a boom in its consumer goods market. In its monthly report, the state-run agency highlighted Korea's current export imbalance. In 2014, intermediate goods took up a lion's share of total shipments at 79%, compared to consumer goods, which accounted for a measly 3.7%. The report's author urged Korea to export more goods like cars, cosmetics, and home appliances, and also branch out into more provinces in Asia's largest economy. China's consumer goods market was only beat by the U.S. last year and is projected to be worth $14.4 trillion by the year 2020. U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen has emphasized that the U.S. Central Bank will move cautiously when it comes to further rate hikes. Yellen said it was appropriate to adjust the rate policy carefully, a remark consistent with the Fed's previous position revealed in mid-March. Our Park Jong-won has this report.
Federal Reserve Chief Janet Yellen has reiterated caution in hiking U.S. rates. Giving a speech at the Economic Club of New York on Tuesday, Yellen said it was appropriate to adjust the rate policy carefully, as inflation has not yet proven durable against the backdrop of global risks to the U.S. economy.
Given the risk to the outlook, I consider it appropriate for the committee to proceed cautiously in adjusting policy.
Her remarks come 2 weeks after the Fed decided to hold benchmark interest rates steady. At its March policy meeting, the U.S. Central Bank had pointed to an overseas slowdown and early-year market turmoil as reasons for the pause. On Tuesday, Yellen said the risks of premature rate hikes and derailing growth outweigh the hazards of needing to catch up to a stronger-than-expected economy. She added that the Fed still expected headwinds, such as weak growth overseas and low oil prices, to subside slightly and allow the recovery to continue. Meanwhile, the Fed chief called economic reports this year, quote, somewhat mixed, noting that strength in the U.S. labor market, consumer spending, and housing had offset a sluggish global economy and depressed crude prices. The decent U.S. economic data had prompted some other Fed officials to suggest another rate hike could be possible in April or June. Park Jong-hong, Business Daily.
The April 13th general elections is quickly approaching, and Korea's political parties are gearing up to win over the hearts of voters with a series of ambitious campaign pledges. One of the focal points being how parties plan to create more jobs and breathe new life into the economy. And for more on that and how voters are reacting to these policy pledges, we're now joined by our Hang Ji-hye in the studio. So Ji-hye, can you first tell us some of the key points that these political parties have been trying to drive home?
The ruling Saenuri Party is focusing on slamming the opposition for preventing the passage of what it says are key economic bills. The main opposition, Minju Party of Korea, on the other end, is calling for a referendum of the Park Geun-hye administration's poor handling of the economy. So it's sort of a blame game as the economy is going through one of the most difficult times with the unemployment rate among the younger generation hitting a record high last month. And of course, we can't leave out the country's traditional growth engine, exports, plunging for over a year now.
Yeah, it's been quite a long time. Now, going one step farther, what kind of policy pledges have the parties laid out so far?
Saenuri Party has put a lot of emphasis on drastic restructuring which they claim that will in turn create new jobs and further push up the country's growth rate. Minju Party is focusing more on closing the gap between the rich and the poor, or in other words, large companies and small and mid-sized firms. The difference in the campaign pledges can be seen clearly in how each party views the country's conglomerates that have been leading Korea's growth for years, but which have also been criticized for enjoying all the benefits gleaned from growth. The econ chief of the Saenuri Party says that conglomerates need support in the process of restructuring from the government to create jobs for the younger generation. On the other hand, the head of the opposition party stresses the need for so-called economic democratization, saying that the party will work to improve the country's conglomerate-dominated economic structure. Take a listen.
I want to emphasize that regulating large companies will not result in supporting SMEs. Through restructuring, we have to find firms with new growth engines that can create jobs and reduce the number of companies with no future prospects. To carry out this restructuring, we need government-owned banks to help conglomerates with the process.
Recent economic conditions show that conglomerates and financial institutions are monopolizing the economy. It's a hopeless situation where we have the upper 10% depriving the opportunities of the remaining 90%. Our party will pour efforts into breaking down this monopoly to create opportunities for the 90% and promote greater unity in society.
Now, welfare issues are also a sticking point when it comes to campaign pledges, especially when we take into account Korea's aging society and low birth rate. So how do rival parties differ in that regard?
Basically, the Saenuri Party is arguing for a selective welfare system, whereas the Minju Party is calling for a universal welfare system that supports not just people in the lower income bracket, but one that also partially covers those in the middle income group. For example, the opposition party pledges to raise the basic pension provided for those aged 65 and over, and to fall in the lower 70% income bracket to roughly $250 from the current $85 to $170. The parties are also at the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to how they view the household debt issue. The ruling party does not see it as an imminent threat, saying extending the repayment period for the loans will solve the issue. The opposition party, however, takes it more seriously, vowing to write off debts of the lower income and with those who have low credits.
I know we still have 2 weeks left until the elections, and we're probably going to see more pledges down the line. But at this point, how are voters reacting to these campaign pledges?
Well, not so surprisingly, what's grabbing voters' attention is not what each party is pledging to do, but it's more like the recent wrangling over party candidate nominations. And this applies to both ruling and opposition parties, which really means that there's still a long way to go for Korean politics to take things to the next level.
Whether to nominate the former floor leader Yoo Seung-min was the most memorable news I've seen recently.
I remember the controversy over interim leader Kim Jong-in's ranking on proportional representation candidates.
And as many have criticized, campaign pledges often end up stopping just there, lacking specific ways of implementation. So it's really now up to the voters to take a closer look and decide who they want in parliament for the next 4 years.
Definitely a lot to keep an eye on as we wait on that elections to come. All right, thank you so much for coming in today, Jihae.
Thanks for having me.
The global mobile phone market has shrunk for the first time in 2.5 years. That's according to Strategy Analytics, which revealed that in the fourth quarter of 2015, there was a 1% contraction in sales compared to the previous quarter. This is due to the uptake of smartphones failing to keep up with the dropping number of feature phones around the world. And although smartphone sales are slowing, the industry is still relatively robust, posting 12% growth on year. Strategy Analytics also confirmed that while Apple has the highest earnings, Samsung Electronics sells the most phones, and together they hold 2/3 of the entire global market. Korea's rapidly aging population is expected to grow at an accelerated pace. The U.S. Census Bureau's An Aging World 2015 report suggests the nation's percentage of population aged 65 and over will be second in the world after Japan, currently the oldest nation in the world. Japan will retain that position through at least 2050, with a projection of 40.1% of its population in that age group, and will be followed by Korea with 35.9% and Taiwan with 34.9%. Worldwide, 8.5% of the population, or 617 million, were in that senior age bracket as of last year. But the figures are expected to jump to 17% of the world's population, or 1.6 billion, by 2050. Around this time of the year, more and more Koreans turn to samgyeopsal, or pork-bellied barbecue, to satisfy their hunger. And it's an accessible meat today, but that wasn't always the case back in the day. And our Eunice Kim takes us through the past and present of a national favorite, samgyeopsal.
Whether over a cast iron hot plate or a charcoal grill, the three-layered meat and fat samgyeopsal is a meal sought out by Koreans from all walks of life, especially in the spring.
It said samgyeopsal helps flush out industrial toxins from yellow dust and particulate matter.
How the grilled pork belly became a national favorite is up for debate. Pork belly did make an appearance in a later edition of a Joseon-era cookbook in the 1930s as one of the tastiest parts of the pig. And a newspaper article written in 1959 recommends samgyeopsal as a dinner entry. But for years, most Koreans thumbed their noses at samgyeopsal when there were few refrigerating tools. Then in the 1960s, samgyeopsal left over from exports to Japan took air.
In the 1970s, samgyeopsal was the best when having drinks with friends. This still holds true given our financial situation.
Having since been elevated to the status of Koreans and expats' favorite pork dish, samgyeopsal has even inspired its own namesake day on March 3rd. It's also called 금겹살 or gold gyopsal by some for its rising cost. Preparation trends are maturing as well. While most take the meat unseasoned, others marinate it in wine for a swankier option. And now they're dry aging pork.
We dry age the meat for 2 to 5 weeks. The natural curing method condensates the juices for superior taste.
One of the draws is less smoke from the reduced fat content.
The grease and oil made it a bit too much for ladies, but dry-aged samgyeopsal is much more delicious, light, soft, and chewy.
The barbecue that has seen Koreans through good times and bad, samgyeopsal continues its evolution. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
A Seoul edition of the world's most reputable reference to dining out, the Michelin Guide, will be launched later this year, boosting the city's profile as a global culinary destination. The Seoul Guide will be the 4th edition in Asia and the 27th globally. And our Park Se-young tells us that it has already drawn top-notch hotels into the quest for a Michelin star.
The time may have come for Seoul to take its place as one of the rising food capitals of the world. That's because the Michelin Guide is planning to publish its first edition for the capital by the end of a year, and its anonymous inspectors are already roaming the city in search of the best cuisine. Restaurants awarded stars by the Guide typically enjoy widespread recognition and get booked months in advance. So the news that Michelin had kicked off its evaluation process at the beginning of a month prompted Korea's high-end hotels to roll out a new batch of marketing strategies to publicize their businesses. Just this month alone, luxury hotels like Silla, Lotte, and Westin Joseon invited Michelin star chefs to lead a series of gourmet dinner parties for a select number of guests. And more globally recognized chefs have been invited through the end of the year, despite the $85,000 it costs to hire professionals of that caliber. But the hotels aren't holding back one bit, with most saying that not only is this a good opportunity to attract interest, if they land in the pages of the upcoming guide, the publicity could also boost sales.
We have three intentions: learning cooking skills, forming networks among chefs, and promoting our services to our customers.
Michelin's evaluations are based on 5 categories, including ingredient quality, value for the money, and consistency. The Seoul Guide will be updated every year starting in 2017. Park Se-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. But we'll be back tomorrow at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.